The Sharpe ratio is a great tool that we can use to compare different investments and portfolios. It quantifies a portfolio's excess return per unit of risk. First, we'll focus on the excess return portion of this. So the excess return in this case is going to refer to the excess return over and above the risk-free rate of this portfolio. So it's going to take the expected return of the portfolio and it's going to subtract the risk-free rate from that. Remember, the risk-free rate is the rate we can get on the market without taking on any risk. Think of like a US Treasury. They can tend to carry very little risk. In this case, we're just going to assume that they have no risk. So the expected return of a portfolio is going to obviously have some risk attached to it. So it does have risk. And basically what we're calculating in the numerator for this excess return is basically the excess return we are being compensated with for taking on this additional risk over here. And then we're going to divide that excess return by the risk down here, or the standard deviation of the portfolio. The standard deviation can be known as the risk, and that's how we get the excess return per unit of risk. So let's do this with an example now. We have two different portfolios, portfolio 1, which has an expected return of 11% and a risk of 15%, and portfolio 2, which has an expected return of 16% and a risk of 20%. So to calculate the Sharpe ratio, we're going to sub in, first we'll do with portfolio 1, we're going to sub in the expected return of 11%, and we're going to minus the risk-free rate of 3% from that, which gives us 8%, and we're going to divide it by the risk of 15%, which is here, and 8% divided by 15% gives us 0.533. So now we want to see if portfolio 2 is better than portfolio 1. And if the Sharpe ratio is higher, then it will be better because we are being rewarded with more excess return per unit of risk. The higher the Sharpe ratio, the better a portfolio or investment is said to be. So to calculate the Sharpe ratio for portfolio 2 here, we're going to take the 16% expected return in portfolio 2, we're going to minus the 3% risk-free rate, and we're going to take that, which is 13%, and divide it by the risk of portfolio 2, which is 20%, and 13% divided by 20% gives us a Sharpe ratio of 0.65. So now we compare these two portfolios and we see that the Sharpe ratio is higher in portfolio 2. So the Sharpe ratio is higher in portfolio 2, and therefore we can conclude that portfolio 2 is a better investment than portfolio 1 because we are being rewarded with more excess return per unit of risk.